Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Let's begin with a quote. The quote is by Mahatma Gandhi, and you must have already heard this quote. It's again a very profound quote. The world has enough for everyone's needs, but not for everyone's greed. So when you think of your solution using the design thinking process, keep this in mind. It's a very, very important statement. What is design concern? So you can see that design is concerned about people, about the society, about the life and nature surrounding us. So if you look at design, it has to make use of good or appropriate use of communication technology and be respect to the use of materials. There were two very nice statements during the Industrial Revolution. Form follows function by Louis Sullivan, which basically says that the form is dependent on what the product does. It's very much dependent on that. It's very much connected to what it does. The other is a very profound statement, less is more, by Mies van der Rohe. It means if you can use less material and create more out of it, nothing like it. Design for what? What could be the different functions or purposes? It could be to inform, to communicate. It could be for products and services. So things like context, identity, aesthetics are very important. You could design for learning, socializing and experiencing, or even expression and play. Health and well-being, safety and security, storytelling, sustainability. So the functions are diverse and many. And what kind of environments? Okay, you can design it for all kinds of environments, from schools to hotels to hospitals to homes to metros to airports to railway stations or transportation hubs, parks, gardens, footpaths, roads, bridges, rural and urban sectors. It could be digital communication of physical products. It could be social, sensory and cognitive domains. It could be personal and public. So this is the range of spaces in which you can design products. And for what purposes? Okay, so if you look at John Waters' statement, today's designers do much more than solve problems. They research social, cultural, and commercial trends, analyze changing values, brainstorm for ideas, and convert their findings into new messages, artifacts, or experiences. So it's all about defining what the problem is and where the opportunity exists for new ideas. Very important statement. At entrance to IDC, you'll see that design eases our relationship with the environment, linking creativity and innovation to human need, and using an iterative design process to come out with sustainable solutions. Design for who? So you can decide whether you want to design it for marketing and promotion. This is what happened during just after the Second World War. A lot of products got promoted through marketing and promotion. Though there was no need for the product, it was made into a felt need. Sometimes products are designed because technology exists, and you try to fit the users to this particular technology. Of course, we know that we need to design products for users. Okay, so from being very product-centered to human-centered to life-centered is how we've actually accepted the phases of design. So this is a diagram by Professor Ranjan from NID. Okay, he kind of profiles what are the, capabilities and attitudes of a designer. So it's the profile of an emerging designer. He does research. There's ethics. He dreams. There's thinking. There's an ideology. He draws, sketches. He expresses it. He knows about the society and creates knowledge. And is a collaborative team player. Okay, so it's these combinations in totality that make up the characteristics of a designer. A very interesting take on who the designer is by Iga from an article by Richard Graff, where he points out to three major elements of a designer: the head, the heart, and the hand. The head represents the intellectual component of the designer for him to think and to solve problems. The heart represents the emotional component of the designer for him to feel and then to feel empathy. And the hand, which represents the practical aspects of being a designer, where he acquires the required skills to practice as a designer. How is the design process? We have done this in the section 1 in design process. So it involves research, analysis, ideation, build or doing it, testing it, and then implementing it. So for research, you have to look at many places and come out with a few cases of opportunities, which again, if you look at it, you have to diversify, think of many ideas, and probably take one or two further, and make a prototype of it, test it. Depending on the feedback, you iterate that design and finally implement it. So identifying the problem is need finding. Researching is data collection. Understanding the problem is data analysis. Exploring alternative concepts is to do with creativity and ideation. Then you build mock-ups, that's form giving. Then testing and feedback, it's reflections. And then finally you can end up with an industry or business that's implementing it. So you have the diagram on the right side to complete the picture. So the design process has to do with research, analysis, ideation, building, testing it and implementing it. So the research means you look at users, environment and artifacts. Analysis with inferences and design opportunities. Ideation with creativity and explorations. Building with doing the detail and development. Testing is you iteratively get feedback and reflect upon it and back to trying to do it all over again. And implement is finally produce it through a business or an industry. So there are a few keywords which are coming into this particular slide. The first is cooperative and collaborative. Cooperative means that you take different responsibilities during the design process with your colleagues. And so let's say one does this part, the other one does the other part, and you put it together. Okay, and as against this, collaboration means you work at the same time. Like for example, for brainstorming or ideation, you sit together as a team together and think of these things. Okay, so cooperative and collaborative are very, very important, aspects of the design process. Okay, we also have two more keywords, participative and iterative. Participative, it means that you bring in the users at different stages of the design process. For example, you can bring in children, okay, at different stages, get feedback from them and let them be part of the design process. Okay, so their feedback will let you know whether something is working or not. Okay, and participative design is especially good if you are not so familiar with the user. And as we mentioned, depending on the feedback, you have to iteratively go back and try to modify your design. Okay, 2 more keywords. It's nice if your group that you're working is interdisciplinary because you bring in different skill sets, and also working as a group or a team is always helpful in the design process. The design process is known as the user-driven design process or user-centered design process. So you basically identify needs, understand the problem, create concepts, develop technology, test and verify, and build a business. You start with researching the users and fulfilling these needs. So this is one way of looking at it, but it's not the only way of looking at it. Okay, the business-driven model is entirely different. They start with an idea or a business plan. They put together technology to fulfill that business plan. And basically, they go the other way around and fit users and create needs for it. Okay, so this is another model of the design process. So if you look at it, it's entirely different. And test and verify is done at this stage to refine the technology that they are developing, create variations of it, and you try to fit users and then create needs for making use of this particular product or service. Okay, so we need to realize that both systems actually exist. Okay, there are some terminologies that we've gone through. Let's go through them again. Interdisciplinary, is a good part of the design process. If you can have team members with different backgrounds and skill sets, nothing like it. Working as a group means that team members are, putting all their thoughts and thinking together without hierarchy. Very, very important. Cooperative, that means you share the workload. Each one does his own bit and you all put it together. And collaborative, you all work together at the same time and progress. Participative is you involve the users at different phases of the design process, mainly to get the feedback and then use it iteratively to do the design. And iterative design, it means that it's a cyclic process, improving the design solutions based on the feedback. Okay, so 6 keywords, interdisciplinary, group work, cooperative, collaborative, participative, and iterative. All 6 of them very, very important for the design thinking and innovation process. Let's look at the other models of the design process. There's a beautiful squiggle by Damian Newman, Squiggle it's called. Okay, it's hazy, wicked, uncertain at the beginning, and at every stage of the design process, it becomes a bit clearer, and finally you take forward one design. Okay, very nicely represented, in terms of the design thinking process. This is the design thinking process proposed by the D School at Stanford. The starting with empathize, then define the problem. Once you do that, you ideate and then build prototypes and then test it. So it is a 5-stage design process. Okay, starts with empathy. Okay, and they have methods for that. Okay, and then you define it and ideate, prototype and test it. This is the design thinking process by IDEO, a very well-known design firm based in the Silicon Valley in the Bay Area. So you look at it, it diversifies, then converges, again diverge, and then converge. So it has got 3 stages: the inspiration stage, the ideation stage, and the implementation stage. Okay, and if you looked at the diagram that we had done also, you start looking all over the place, then you converge, and then you ideate, when you diverge again, and finally you take forward 1 or 2 ideas. Okay, so this is a model by Design Council. It's called as the double diamond model. And if you look at it, that's the problem that you've selected, the topic. Then you diverge. Okay, and then you define the problem. Okay, and then you come to saying what the problem statement is, what the brief of the problem is. Okay, then again you have to diverge for ideation and then finally come down to a solution. Okay, so it's again a very nice model. Discover, define, develop, and deliver. This is a detail of the double diamond process by Dan Nestler. So he's given a lot of details in the double diamond process. Okay. So again, you see it's the same model where you diverge and converge, diverge and converge. Within that, you have, like, for example, the brief of the project and the primary research and secondary research. Okay, then you come to insights, and then you come out with opportunities, then ideating, evaluating, and then finally implementing it. Okay, so this again, if you look at it, there are 5 stages to the whole project. Let's look at something, Professor Chakravarti from IDC School of Design at IIT Bombay has been researching on. He calls it as the 7 C's, okay, of the design thinking and innovation design process, okay. So he starts with the cause, then the context, then the comprehension of the problem, then the check whether your brief is right, then the conception, that's the ideation, the crafting, that is to do with building it, and then the connection with the user, that's the final stage. Okay, so managed to put all in C's and 7 C's. So just remember: cause, context, comprehension, check, conception, crafting, and connection. Okay, so let's look at it. Okay, the cause is you identify the needs of the cause for the problem area, right? And then the context is trying to understand the problem space and the environment. Okay, the comprehension is the analysis to arrive at opportunities for design. The check is creating the product brief. Okay, this is of course after your studies. And then the conception is generating several alternate ideas and concepts. To building it, that means you make prototypes, you make mock-ups, okay, with detailing, and then you get feedback on that. And the final one is the delightful user experience and satisfaction that you get out of trying to solve the problem. Okay, so that means that you have a problem, you found a solution, and it has satisfied the needs of the user. Okay, all through 7 C's. At IDC itself, we followed this design process right from 1970 onwards. Okay, so it's a creative design process. Start with research, analysis, concepts, prototype, and then develop it. Okay, so if you look at the details of it, it's need finding, primary and secondary research. You do affinities, look for opportunities. Then you look at creativity, okay, and then develop, prototype, and get feedback, and then do the detailing. Okay, and the tools that we use are interviews, site visits, focus groups, okay, mapping, scenarios, data analysis, brainstorming for ideas, and sketching. Then you do mock-ups, soft prototypes to proof of concept. And then you do the final models to evaluation and getting feedback from this. So this is the design thinking process that we came out for children in schools. Okay, so they start with observation, then experiencing it, and then followed by creative play. Then they build or construct, and then that leads to an understanding of the subject. Okay, so if you look at observation, they go outside, discover, they study. That's the first phase. They use the sensories in the second stage to experience what they observed. It's physical. They have to use their motor skills to do it. So touch plays an important role. Seeing plays an important role. Followed by creative play. So this has to do with stories, imagination, role plays, and then you build. Okay, so this has to do with construction, developing, putting it together. And then the final stage is that it actually leads to an understanding of the subject. Let's look at design thinking and innovation, okay, from the perspective of Indian knowledge systems. It's not that design thinking and innovation were key words in this period, but if you look at it, Abhikalpa meant design, Manan meant knowledge, and a combination of this played a very important part in actually coming out with these Shastras. Okay, so you had the Shilpa Shastra, which was basically for the arts, sculpture and crafts and artifacts, right? And then you had the Vastu Shastra, which was about space, it was about architecture and built spaces, and Natya Shastra, which was about performing arts. Okay, so you had all the three. Okay, and if you look at what it contained in terms of knowledge it provided, okay, it provided a system and a structure for practicing these arts. Okay, and if you look at it, it started with observation, okay, and this observation was about the nature, what was surrounding us, okay, and this observation was done not just in a day or a week or a month, it was across years together. So this experience is something that went into forming these Shastras, okay. After observation, there was a very critical analysis of this, okay, which actually laid down the structure. And this structure was a very interesting structure because this structure allowed you to create very innovative variations of the same thing. Okay, I'll explain that in a bit. Okay, and then if you had to learn these arts, okay, you had to go through a long period of time where you tried, made mistakes and corrected it and learned one by one step at a time. Okay, so it took a long period of time to master these skills. Okay, but once you mastered them, you implemented them. Okay, and it became useful, whether it was an artifact or a building or a performance. Okay, it was watched, right, and practiced and used by people. Okay, and if you look at it, this has survived thousands of years. Okay, and that's a great validation because it's still being used, for so many years. So let's look at some more details of them. Okay, let's look at, for example, a very simple thing like Rangoli. Okay, if you look at it, Rangoli is based on observation from nature. Okay, it uses natural colors. So you'll see that in some places where flowers are abundant, you use flowers. In some places, rice is used. Okay, in some places, mixture of color which made out from plant dyes are used. Okay, so it depends on what material is available in the nature, and then you have a system of generating a pattern. Okay, and it's based on a structure. Okay, but this structure is not a rigid structure. It's a very variable structure. It means that, you can actually make variations of the same theme almost on a daily basis. You can create many variations of it. Okay, Rangoli as a skill can be learned quite easily, not as complex as, let's say, learning Indian classical music or sculpture. Okay, so it takes a lesser period of time, but then you'll see that some are very adapted. Okay, you need quite a lot of skills to do Rangoli so efficiently and to create these variations on a daily basis. Okay, and then it's implemented. Okay, and then it has been practiced over generations too. So if you look at it, observation starts with looking at nature, okay, conceiving of what is, important from nature, okay, and the 5 elements of the nature play a very important role here, okay, and it's mapped on to the human being. For example, you have the sky, which is your head, okay. Then you have the air, which is what you breathe, okay. Then you have the fire, which is actually your stomach, okay. Then you have the water, which is actually your water system. And then you have the earth, that's where you stand upon, okay. So they map the elements of nature to the parts of the human being, okay. This is one thing. And then if you look at temples, for example, this is reinterpreted in terms of architecture in the temple, okay. So you'll see either a, lying man or a standing man, okay, as being the mappings for making of a temple, okay, and so on and so forth. There are so many more examples, but what I'm trying to say is that it starts with observation, deep observation of the nature, getting inspired from that and critically analyzing this data, okay, and mapping onto systems like this to create something like this, okay, which can become the fractals, for example, how the architecture of a temple is done, or for example, the variations of that you have in mandalas, okay, and these lead to creative variations, okay. So for the same reason, a weaver, for example, can produce so many variations of the same theme. Okay, he almost never makes the same pattern again because he's got these creative variations embedded into the structure. So he's able to make so many varieties of that. Okay. And if this has to be passed on, it's through a process of learning which happens, which takes a period of time to do it. And then it gets implemented, whether it's a art form or whether it's a building or an artifact or whether it's a performing arts, for example. And you can see that it has been there for a long period of time. So we have a lot to learn from the Indian knowledge systems. So design process was actually a part of it. So let's look at the summary of what we've gone through, the different models of design thinking and innovation. Squiggle by Damien was a very, very interesting variations of it. Then you have the design thinking as practiced by D-School. D-School and IDO made design thinking as a process very, very popular. There's the double diamond by Design Council that we had a look at, and the detail of this by Dan Nestler. And we have had our own design thinking and the 7 C's by Professor Chakravarti, where he breaks up the design process into all words starting with C's. Okay, and we also had a look at the design process that was followed at the IDC School of Design for a very long period of time, from the 80s onwards. Okay, and a version of it which we made for school children. Okay, so which was a bit variation because it starts with observation, creativity, making things, and then we had a look at the design process as part of the Indian knowledge systems. Okay, so it's not that you have to follow one method. You can adopt from any one of this. Okay, depending so whatever is comfortable, please follow that. Okay, and we need to look at the person behind design thinking. It was actually Herbert Simon, okay, who proposed design as a way of thinking. Okay, and it was in his book called The Science of the Artificial, published a long time back, 1969. Okay, so he said that you have to look design as a science, okay, and it's need to be looked at as a way of problem solving, and it's also a way of thinking. Okay, so according to Simon, the proper study of mankind is the science of design. Okay, so it has to do with people, it has to do with users. So that's, I think, the important statement that he made. And to design is to devise courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred one. So that means that you're making a small change, which makes a big change in terms of innovation. Okay, so you're bettering the situation by means of design. This section is on design environment, or the space for design, and the takeaways. So I would call it as the attitude behind design. Okay, starts with experiencing the problem space. That means what we are saying is that go to the location where the problem exists, talk to the users. That's a very important thing. So you kind of experience what the issues are. It's always nice to have an interdisciplinary team to solve the problem. We are expecting you to do the project on your own. Okay. But at every stage, wherever it helps, being part of a team, you can take your colleagues to be with you. Especially during ideation and brainstorming, group inquiry and ideation helps. If you can get the participation of your user to come in at different stages of design, nothing like it. And don't think that one idea is good. Many ideas are important. And it's also important that if you get feedback, depending on the feedback, you need to change what you thought of. It's always nice to think of the problem and visualize it, because you can make connections very nicely. If you can do that around your table or the wall, you can put up things connected with your project. So you kind of make that place into a project space. And of course, the last one is that, design thinking and innovation problem solving has to do with involvement and conviction that at the end of the day, you'll actually come out with a good solution. Okay, that's a confidence in which you go forward. Okay, so I'll end with this quote by Picasso. I'm always doing that which I cannot do. I'm always doing that which I cannot do in order that I may learn how to do it. So it's very, very important for us to think of a problem space. We don't know what the solution is, but you have to work towards it. And in working towards it, I'm hoping that all of us will learn something about how to do it.